Stand by to initiate release sequencer. On my mark. 5.
We're on express elevator to hell. Going down.
2. 1. Mark.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mark, a.k.a. Derringer. Today is Sunday, December 31st. Yes, you heard me correctly. Last day of 2017, and you are listening to episode 138 of the Instant Action Podcast, your weekly source for Planetside 2 news and information. As always, I'm brought to you by great listeners like you via the Support the Show tab on instantactionpodcast.com. So Christmas is over. New Year's is this evening. You guys will be listening to this show on New Year's Day. But I hope everybody enjoyed last week's show. I know some of you may have missed it because I did decide to release it on Christmas Day as my Christmas present to everybody. Luckily, my second post that I put out last Thursday via YouTube seems like it got a lot more views and a lot more ears, and people got to hear what Nick had to say about things like the Combined Arms Initiative, about the Canis, and about what's coming in 2018. So if you guys missed out on that, go back and listen to episode 137. It's a pretty good just before the year-end show and talks a lot about what we can expect to see in the beginning of 2018. Also, as everybody knows, the Platinum Heavy Weapons were released last Friday, so just a couple days ago. I did purchase the Platinum Lasher. I didn't buy the mini chain gun or the jackhammer, though. I mean, the Lasher's the one that I used most, and I have the regular mini chain gun, and I have the regular jackhammer, and I have the AE variants of both of those as well because they came in one of the anniversary bundles as well. So I mean, technically I have plenty of mini chain guns and jackhammers if I want to use them. I have not Araxiumed any of those, unlike the Lasher, which I've Araxiumed both the regular version and the AE version, so I was really looking forward to Araxiuming the Platinum version to have all three Araxiumed. So like I said, I didn't purchase the other two, and mainly it's because of the cost. I mean, they were, $1,400 Daybreak cash each, and I just kind of decided I had enough to purchase one. If I wanted the others, I would have had to have purchased more, so I just kind of held off and only purchased one at this time. If they decide to bring those back at some point, I will probably pick up the other two at a later date. Hopefully, worst case scenario, there's something that we see in the 31 days of Araximus in 2018. I'm still holding out hope that maybe we'll see all this stuff again on January 1st, 2018. I believe they did that back at the end of 2016, beginning of 2017. So maybe we'll see that stuff again one extra day. If that does happen, I'm home with the day off. Maybe I'll pick up those other two. I'm not 100% sure at this point. But like I said, I do have my Platinum Lasher. As soon as I finish the holiday directive on one of my characters, yes, I know, I should have been done with this a long time ago. I'm down to just either finding a golden snowman or finishing up the draw fire ribbons with a snowman statue out there. So I'm pretty much almost done, and then I'll get my Jolly title, and we'll go from there. And then after that, it's going to be Lasher all day, every day, until I Araxium it or until I'm told to switch factions. But that's neither here nor there, because what is actually in store for this week's show? Well, first I want to cover the December 19th PTS update that I missed talking about last week due to Nick being on the show. Let's be honest, talking to Nick was much more important than going over the PTS update. Then I want to do a quick recap of all of 2017 and Planetside 2. So we're going to go through everything that happened in Planetside 2, well, all the big stuff, I guess, that happened in Planetside 2 in 2017, kind of a month-by-month thing. I know this is something I did last year as well, and a lot of people enjoyed it, so this is also good for some returning players who are kind of like, well, what did I miss over the last year? Well, this is going to wrap all that up for you. And then I want to finish the show and talk about New Year's resolutions. So strap in as we hot drop into another episode of the Instant Action Podcast. Okay, like I said, first up this week, the December 19th PTS update. And the biggest thing that they dropped on the PTS here is Koltyr. And basically, the continent of Koltyr, which everybody knows was being used by below BR15 people. That's where you kind of get dropped in the beginning of the game to play around with and kind of learn how to do stuff before you dropped out into the real world. Let's be honest, no one is using Koltyr anymore. So it's being repurposed as a virtual reality training area. So like we have the VR zone currently, now we're going to be able to play on Koltyr instead. And you will be able to reach this from the world map screen or a warp gate terminal. They'll have up to 2 instances of it at any time. Up to 33 players on each of the 3 factions can make use of this continent. So a total of 33 times 3, 99 players. If they have 2 of them up, you're doubling that. There is no experience gain while you're playing on Koltyr. All air vehicles are disabled on Koltyr, and the only available ground vehicles are the Flash, the Sunder, and the Lightning. And they did say that they're planning on disabling friendly fire on Koltyr as well, but right now it remains enabled. And so clearly this is an area for you to go out and play around with different weapons and stuff like that, and actually play against other live players at the same time. Very interesting change and usage of Koltyr moving forward. I think Koltyr really is an underutilized resource in the game because, well, I mean, kind of nobody goes to it anymore. So very nice to see that happening. I do wish that they would enable all air. I wish they'd enable all vehicles on Koltyr, specifically air vehicles, because it would be a nice area for new pilots to kind of learn how to fly. I think that new pilots definitely have a tough time on live because they get jumped on by experienced pilots and things like that. So perhaps this will allow people to better learn how to fly, things like that. Otherwise, I think this is an excellent idea, repurposing it as a VR training area. Because, I mean, let's be honest, the current VR area is kind of crappy. You know, the targets don't move, whereas doing it on Koltyr, you're actually going to have moving people, moving vehicles, things like that. Again, I think this is a great idea and a good addition. I did think that they should probably make Koltyr a battle island and kind of loop it into the warp gate system, but hey, this is what we're going to get in the meantime. Now, in addition to the Koltyr VR change, there were a bunch of other little bug fixes. Nothing really huge. I mean, the big changes are the series hydroponics and the crown's D point should be capturable again. That's currently a bug on live. And there's some sky shield issues as well that are fixed on the PTS. I expect all these various things to be coming to live early in January, if not this week or the next week. Again, these should be really things that we're seeing pretty quickly moved on to live. And then I'll be curious to see what people's thoughts are of Koltyr on live once it actually is out there and people can go ahead and use it. That is the total of that PTS update. I mean, it's been pretty quiet over at Daybreak Games this past week because obviously it's the holidays and I'm sure a lot of people are on vacation and doing other things. I'm sure everything will ramp up once we actually move into January itself. So with that, let's move on to our 2017 in review. Can I just say that 2017 definitely was an interesting year for Planetside 2. You know, when you kind of experience it all, it just sort of happens and you don't really recognize all the different things that got changed or added or are different from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. That's why I love doing reviews like this on the last show of the year or the first show of the new year. Like I said, since it's been pretty quiet at Daybreak Games, I thought this is the perfect show to kind of do this recap of the entire year. And the nice thing is I had, 52 or I guess 51 weeks of show notes to go back on and actually look at all these various changes. So I've kind of spent the better part of a day going through them all and kind of picking out all the nice, interesting things that happened throughout the year. And I'll go through these on a month-by-month basis. So starting in January, that was way back on episode number 86, and we're on episode, 138 today. So like I said, it was a while ago. I did have Rel on my show as a special guest, and we talked about why Hassan isn't an enjoyable continent and ways that they could change that. We talked about the status of construction in the game. We talked about the new NSX weapons that were coming to the game in 2017. Because you got to remember, back in January of last year, there were no NSX weapons in the game. And he also teased the Derringer pistol for the first time, saying that they had an unused model that they would like to put in game and name after me. And we all kind of know where that went. In addition to having him on my show, within the game itself, infiltrators got access to battle rifles, all the various heavy weapons in the game, your lasher, your mini chain gun, your jackhammer, they got buffs. Thermal optics got renamed to threat detection optics, and they no longer highlighted infantry in the game, and that was a very controversial change to thermal optics. Again, a lot of people on vehicles specifically were only running thermal optics, and then once this change went in, I think that dropped off significantly. In addition, in January, Rock, Paper, Shotgun named Planetside 2 the 13th best first-person shooter game on the PC, and I'd be curious what they rank it now, because, we've got games like Battlefield 1 have come out since. We have, maybe it didn't come out in 2017. I'll have to double check on that. No Battlefield 1, but we do have some other stuff that came out in 2017. Like, obviously, Destiny 2, Call of Duty World War II came out, Star Wars Battlefront 2, Lawbreakers. Those are just to name some of the newer games we got in 2017. I'm curious if Rock, Paper, Shotgun would revise that list and move Planetside 2 further down, or if it would still stay at 13th best FPS game. When we moved on into February, I was joined on episode 91 by Vindicor of the Vindicators. Obviously, he has the Planetside 2 upgrade project website, and we spent some time going over all the various things that he's covered on that site, and talked about changes that he'd like to see on things like squads and outfit progression, and that's all stuff that we know is coming in 2018. So curious to see what things that Vindicor did or has done in the past are going to make it in the game. If you're curious about that show, like I said, go back and download episode 91 and you can hear me talk to Vindicor. In addition to that, NSX Tonto was released into the game. We also got the Master Tier reward of the Kabuto. So I guess that does mean we did have NSX weapons in 2016. Looks like we only had a couple, though, prior to that. So I guess ignore what I said before. That's certainly incorrect. But again, Tonto was released. The Kabuto was released. The Godsaw got its secondary firing mode. Remember, the Godsaw secondary firing mode can now damage vehicles. The Great Galaxy Bulldog nerf came to the game. I know a lot of people were upset about that. Let's be honest, Bulldogs were doing a hell of a lot of damage on galaxies that were just circling points. I think the nerf was warranted. Did I like using Bulldogs on galaxies? Yes, I really did, but certainly I think that change had to be made. Also, the recharge delay on engineer shields got reduced as well. That was another big change in February itself. Also, speaking of Nick Silva, in February he was introduced as the producer of Planetside 2 and released his first producer's letter with what he wanted to see brought into the game in 2017. I think they've stayed true to the majority of what he posted about in that original producer's letter. Also, Ickenam got its first changes on the PTS. I'll talk about Ickenam a little bit later when it actually comes in. And also within this producer letter, the first stages of what would be the Combined Arms Initiative were first introduced to the populace of Planetside 2 in general, all the way back in February. Then moving on to March, everyone's favorite Buzzcut Psycho announced on Twitch that he was coming back to Planetside 2. And he also joined me for an exclusive interview on March 19th. That's back on episode 97. He and his folks have pretty much left Planetside 2 again, but there was a good month or two that the Enclave was huge in Planetside 2, everywhere, at least on the Emerald server. I mean, everywhere you went on Emerald, there were tons of Enclave members. I saw Buzzcut Psycho constantly online. I think he was online pretty much every day, leading platoons and generally being the max main that he is. I thought that it was a good shot in the arm for Buzzcut Psycho and the Enclave to come back to the game. And I know people out there don't like him, don't like the Enclave. I do think that his interview on my show kind of changed some people's thoughts to him because he enjoys playing the bad guy and being the jerk in the room, his words. I really think that he was good for Planetside 2 and bringing a lot of people back in. I mean, all those people got membership. It had to be a really good shot in the arm financially for Daybreak Games to have him come back. Maybe he'll think of another return in 2018. I certainly would not be against it. Also in March, I attended PAX East 2017. I've got my tickets already for PAX East 2018, and I will do another show this coming year on my experiences at PAX East. Also, we got some additions into the game itself, such as the Orbital Strike was added. They released the new implant system and ISO 4 in March. Hardlight barriers for engineers were released in March. And also C4s could now be deconstructed by engineers in March. So a lot of new things added into March itself. In April, I released episode 100 of the Instant Action podcast, certainly a pretty cool milestone for me. I guess the next milestone is going to be episode 200, but we're still 62 episodes away, so episode 200 is not going to happen until 2019, so you'll have to stay tuned for that one. But honestly, for me, episode 100 was a huge milestone. I did some giveaways. I gave out some Daybreak Games cash codes. I gave out some dog tags to people. I gave out some t-shirts. I gave out some coffee mugs. A lot of cool things to celebrate my 100th episode of of the Instant Action podcast. Also, I still see a lot of people retweeting the posts for Daybreak Cash for a contest that ended over half a year ago, which kind of amused me every time I see them pop up. We also got the NSX Yumi released in April, and a big one was that infiltrators could now resupply and regain ammo while they are cloaked. Also in April, on episode 103, I was joined by the PlayStation Battles folks, both Lanzer and Pronam, and they announced their big agreement between ESL, Daybreak Games, and showing various Planetside Battles events. Honestly, though, we haven't heard too much about ESL since that. I know it's also my fault for not following up too much on that one either. I mean, I know I joined it when it happened, and I get various emails from them off and on, but I haven't heard too much about the Planetside stuff. Maybe the Planetside Battles folks will be kind to enlighten me on what exactly is happening. Moving on to May of 2017, though, we got the ISO 4 Recycler added to the game, and also the Directive Implant Awards were also added. So this was the Directive Implant Awards were for basically new characters. Some of the main classes like the Medic, the Infiltrator, Light Assault, things like that. If you hadn't done the first couple levels of the directives for those, you got free implants for doing them. They were only basic implants, but free implants are free implants still for new characters. We also had a construction test on the PlayStation 4, which resulted in some horrible frame rates, and I think that's the main reason why we still don't or still haven't seen construction make its way onto the PlayStation 4, moving on to 2018. We also had something awful happen to the game in May 2017, and that was the suicide hack was introduced to the game. And this was the hack where somebody would force everyone around them in the hex to commit suicide and die. It was such an awful, awful thing that it made a lot of people stop playing the game until the hack could be recreated and fixed and things like that. We also had our first Araxian Loyalty Week in May, and this was the first time outside of an anniversary bundle that heroic boosts were sold. And I know a lot of people went in and purchased heroic boosts. So I'm hoping that we're going to see another Araxian Loyalty Week this coming May when things like boosts are sold. Maybe that's when we'll see the platinum heavy weapons come round again. In June, we discovered the prototype tanks on PTS, and there was a lot of talk about a prototype tank alert type coming to the game. Obviously, that never materialized, but we do know those prototype tanks are still sitting out there in the game files, but not being used. We also got the NSX Tengu in June. Tengu is probably one of my favorite NSX weapons to date. We also got a second wave of the new implants. A lot of the class-specific implants were dropped in that particular wave. They also changed the continent lock and facility benefits in June. And Econom Biolab finally made its way to live, and this is the first and still only base that allows construction on it or around it, things like that. And that's kind of a big deal now that when you go really sit down and actually think about it. I do wish they do that to a lot more bases, and hopefully in 2018 they've gotten enough feedback from how Iconam is working to maybe add that to some of the other bases in the game itself. They also made the change to EMPs so they no longer drained ability in June. And they also did a huge, in addition to just Iconam itself, a revamp on Amurish altogether. And a lot of people were sad when the always favorite farm at Subterranean Nanite Analysis was removed. I think I even named a show SNA RIP as a result. And the other big change was that biolabs started to become opaque, meaning that you could no longer see through the domes. And everyone knows that was a big performance increase in and around biolabs as a result. Moving on to July, the first Freedombration was celebrated. That's the 4th of July stuff, where they regained access to flare guns, Patriot camos, etc. But the coolest thing was they added something to the game called Freedom Thrusters, which obviously they were for light assaults, and they had really nice colored contrails coming out the back of them. Really cool to see them do just a one-off thing thrown into the game for just a short amount of time. People use them constantly, and I'm hoping that those little things like that are going to continue to make their way into the game during various times. I'd love to see maybe a heart thruster on Valentine's Day. That would kind of be cool, or things like that. So I kind of have my hopes up that they have some things like that in the works. They also, in July, changed IR Smoke and renamed it to Smokescreen, but the bigger thing was they allowed it to affect nearby vehicles as well, not just the vehicle that pops the smokescreen. In addition, we saw some continent lock changes based on server population, and this was specifically to allow 3 continents to be locked at once, depending on what the population was, and really this was to counteract some of the summer decline that they were seeing within the game itself. In addition to that, we saw a lot of lattice changes within the continent of Indar. They released the NS-45 pilot sidearm. They also put in the Mayhem directives for using some of the Mayhem weapons, and they made a lot of changes to the personal shield mechanics within the game itself. Then the sad news in July, and this really affected me because I considered him a friend and one of the people I talked to a lot within Daybreak Games, but Tony Jones, better known as Radar X, stepped down as the community the community manager of Daybreak Games and left the company altogether. Again, it was very sad to see him go because I've been interacting with Tony for 5 years at this point. We talked to him a lot back in the Reachcast days, and anytime I ever needed anything at Daybreak Games, he was always willing to respond to me, whether it was on Twitter, whether it was on Skype. If I ever needed anything in-game, he was quick to get it for me. Just an all-around great guy, and I was very sad to see him go. Obviously, his replacement, Roxley, is doing an excellent job, so she does have big shoes to fill. Next, moving on to August, kind of a quiet month altogether, and obviously it's because of what is coming in September, but they did have a dev live stream near the end of August where they showed off a number of things like the ambusher jump jets, the nano repair grenades that were coming to the game, and they also introduced Paul Giaggio as the programmer for Planetside 2, or a newly hired programmer for Planetside 2. And with Paul, he introduced the newest thing coming to the game called Critical Mass, which everybody is playing the heck out of currently within Planetside 2. Now, moving on to September, this, like I said, was the biggest month within Planetside 2, I think, for 2017, because both the Critical Arms Initiative and the Combined Arms Initiative and the Critical Mass alert update both went live at the end of September. Obviously, we all know there's mixed feelings about the Combined Arms Initiative. I know a lot of vehicle players hate it at this point, and they want changes to it. In fact, I called them a vocal minority last week, and then got a lot of kickback on that, saying that they're not really a minority. They're just very vocal. But I do think that a lot of people are enjoying the Critical Mass alert at this particular junction within the game itself. Obviously, when it was released, it was only for 30 minutes. It's moved up to 45 minutes now, but awards ISO 4, awards items if you're the faction that launches the Critical Mass, a lot of good stuff. They also tried to get people to come back to play these things with the PS2 Welcome Back code, which awarded a Platinum Tonto and a Platinum NS helmet as well. And in addition, before the month ended, we got things like the NSX Daimyo, Ambusher Jump Jets also came to live, the Nano Repair Grenade came to live, and the first weapon to be awarded as part of a Critical Mass alert being won was the NS44L Showdown. This is the Black Hand variant. I don't know how many people actually own that within the game itself, but it's got to be a very low number. And again, as we learned from Rel, you actually need to own a Black Hand in order to win a Showdown as an alert reward. Moving on to October, this is when that aforementioned Meltdown Alert timeline was extended to 45 minutes. That's where we are now with the Meltdown Alerts. But even better than that, the Nanite of the Living Dead event came back, and this included a complete rework of the Halloween directive. A lot of great stuff in here. We got some new pumpkin grenades to throw around. People were hunting pumpkins left and right. There were a lot of people killing other people with flashes and stuff like that as part of these directives. And we got our first reward of a implant, the phylactery implant, as a result of completing a directive. Some really cool stuff. I know last week I thanked Nick profusely for having this directive stuff reworked, as well as the current Christmas directives. In addition, in October, the Engineers ESF Synergy was renamed to Aircraft Synergy, and they changed it so it also stacks with Nanite Auto Repair as well. There was an increase to Sunderer's health from 4,000 to 5,000, and also Nanoweave Armor and Kinetic Armor both got a big revamp in the game itself for both infantry and for max units. When we move on to November, and when I'm thinking about it, that's really just last month, we got the 5th anniversary of Planetside 2. A lot of fanfare regarding that. We got the 5th anniversary bundles, and there were actually 3 of them this year, a low-level cheaper one and a top-tier one, which unlocked everything, including a 1-year heroic boost, which we'd never seen before. We also got various versions of Anniversary Edition carbines, auto scout rifles, camos, vehicle trims, horns, all kinds of things like that. The devs over at DBG also did their first Reddit AMA. That's an Ask Me Anything, and tons of questions were answered. Some maybe not to the extent that people wanted to, but they definitely did do a pretty thorough AMA. They also did a dev live stream shortly after that, where they introduced the new UI programmer, Zach Antoine, and we saw a lot of miscellaneous UI fixes pushed through in November as a result of him being hired. Some other changes we saw in November included not being able to deploy Sunderers in friendly no-deploy zones, and they also removed the squad beacon, being able to spawn on them at closer ranges, so you can spawn directly across the map again based on when a squad beacon is placed. Then moving into the final month, this was December, we got the 31 Days of Araximus back, my aforementioned Platinum Lasher. I think that was probably the only thing that I purchased this year. I have pretty much everything else because in previous years I've purchased them all. So I was very happy to see a new weapon being added in the 31 Days of Araximus. I hope when we see it in 2018 we get some new stuff then as well for veterans like me. We also saw them bringing back the aforementioned Araximus holiday event, and just like the Halloween event, all the directives were redone on this. There's some rewards on the end of it, a jolly title, as well as a mint Lumifiber trim for the Valkyrie. I'm certainly working on that right now, like I said at the beginning of the show. In addition, though, the Gladius, Jackal, and Canis were released. These are the first of Doku's weapons. These are the SMGs. Obviously, the Canis was quickly nerfed based on it being way too overpowered. The NS357 IA Derringer pistol was also released, and I think I've talked about this ad nauseum over the past couple weeks, and everybody's sick of it at this point. So let's just say I've been honored by Daybreak Games with a pistol in the game, and I'm using it a ton. Also, I know I didn't talk about a lot of the specifics on the PlayStation 4 in this breakdown, but a big one in December is the implants, the meltdown alerts, and the combined arms initiative also came to the PlayStation 4 version of Planetside 2 in December. So it was a few months late, but that again was probably the biggest changes seen on the PS4 version of Planetside 2 in December itself. Also, we got some other changes, like the vehicle stealth changes, so they no longer counteract engagement radar completely. And the final thing that I want to say is Nick Silva was my guest on last week's episode of the Instant Action podcast. So I had a full year, as you can see, just like Planetside 2 had a full year, and everybody over at Daybreak Games. So let me be maybe the last, if not one of the few, just saying thank you to everybody over at Daybreak Games for everything that you've done in 2017. Obviously, I didn't cover everything on this list, but I think I gave a pretty good accounting of all the various things that came to Planetside 2 or were changed in Planetside 2 over the course of 2017. And if we get only half of the things that we received in 2017 in 2018, I think that it's going to be a good year. And with that, let's move into our third and final topic for this week's show. And that final topic is New Year's resolutions. And this was sparked by Rel saying on Twitter that he is currently taking suggestions for his New Year's resolutions. He says something in the realm of possibility, please. So no eating healthier, no finding happiness, or no rolling back the combined arms initiative. So I thought I would take a moment and actually give a good suggestion to Rel. So I put my thinking cap on earlier today, and my suggestion, Rel, is your New Year's resolution should be take a vacation to a country that you haven't been to before. Like this is something that I would like to do. This would be my resolution as well for myself. Like maybe visit like England, which I've never been to, but I have lots of English roots, or go to Italy, or go to Spain, go to Portugal, go to Germany. That would be my suggestion to you as a New Year's resolution. And I think it's a doable one, like you said. It's just a matter of getting the time off from work and saving up the money to do it. And I think it would be a good experience for you as well. I know a lot of people say, buy this, buy that. I'm more into experiences myself. Now, if you want a Planetside 2 specific New Year's resolution, I would suggest that on your live streams when you do them, play vehicles more often so that people who are vehicle mains, who are complaining at you all the time, can see that you do play vehicles as well. So that would be my Planetside 2 specific New Year's resolution. Take it or leave it. But with that, let's move into housekeeping this week.
Housekeeping. Housekeeping.
Come back later, please.
Housekeeping.
Not now.
Housekeeping.
Go away.
I coming anyway?
Well, no emails, no voicemails, no nothing this week. Again, it was Christmas last week, so I understand a lot of people are on vacation, whatnot. But leave me a voicemail. You can leave me an email. I'll read them on the show, as I always do. But that's going to be it for this week's show. So as always, how can you get in touch with me or the show? Number one, visit my website, www.instantactionpodcast.com. Send me an email, instantactionshow@gmail.com. Call me, leave me a voicemail, 347-4VM-4PS2 or 347-486-4772. Follow me on Twitter. The show is at InstActPodcast or me personally at The Derringer. But in closing, if you've enjoyed the show, please leave me a review on your podcast listening avenue of choice, whether it's iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or anywhere else. Also, feel free to tell your friends and outfit mates about the show. And finally, thanks for listening in 2017 and keep spamming that Join Combat, formerly known as Instant Action button.